Welcome back to another episode of The Hip. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. Today on The Hip, I was delighted to be joined by John Hannigan, Chief Executive of Circle Voluntary Housing, a housing association based in Ireland. The episode centred around the differences between the Irish housing market and the UK housing market, John having worked in both. How Ireland have got a housing plan that is centralised from the government and how that helps to give certainty to the housing associations in Ireland to create plans for the future. He talks about how tenant engagement has become a really focal point for his organisation and how they've grown over the last 3 to 5 years. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. And how are you, James? How's things?
I'm really good. It's wet and windy in Manchester today. So what about in Ireland?
I have to say wet and windy in Ireland as well. No difference, unfortunately.
It's probably the same answer for every week I do the episodes, to be fair. But as custom, would you mind just give us a bit of introduction to yourself and the organisation you work for?
Yeah, certainly. I'm John Hannigan. I'm CEO of Circle Voluntary Housing Association, which is based in Ireland. We operate across 21 of our 31 local authorities, and we own and manage about 3,000 homes at this point in time. Just to put it in context, because I know this is going out to the UK as well, we are in the top 5 largest associations in the country. So that gives you a sense of what our overall, I suppose, housing situation is like from a social housing perspective. We'd be number 4 in the size charts in Ireland. Our biggest only has about 11,000 homes. So from that perspective, scale is slightly different, but maybe we can talk about that later on when we talk about Ireland in general.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. And thanks for the overview. And you've obviously played pivotal roles on both sides. You know, you've done some in England and you've done some in Ireland. Just give us a bit of an overview of how you got into the sector. It's not traditional in any way, shape or form, but how did you get into it, and kind of give us a bit of an overview of how you got into the sector in the first place?
I think most people of my age particularly kind of fell into the sector in some way, not really expecting to be here. And I started out my career and my life, wanted to be one of the ultimate capitalists. I want to be a major partner in one of the larger firms of accountants. I'm a qualified accountant by trade. I do say I'm a recovering accountant at this point in time. So, you know, getting over those days of ticking and bashing. And yeah, I was working with Grant Thornton in Birmingham. I moved over from Ireland to Birmingham, having qualified with KPMG to get a job in the late 90s, as most Irish people did at that point. Got a job with Grant Thornton, who had clients who were housing associations. And I thought, wow, this is an exotic kind of animal. I've never seen one of these before. Didn't know what they were. I kind of got into, it was very early days of mergers and changes and funding streams and all that kind of stuff in the UK sector. And I was seconded to one of the clients to help them, an organization called Accord, as it was then. And I kind of got to know the CEO a little bit because they were just going through the end elements of a merger, and we were trying to get things back on an even keel. And he kind of recognized something in me that I didn't see in myself, and after a few weeks of having worked with him, he said, "I'd like you to come out with us to meet a few of our tenants when we're going to be handing over some homes." And I went, "Yeah, okay, what's this got to do with finance? No, I don't want to be doing this, but you're a client, so I'm not going to say no." Went out, and he kind of handed me a set of keys and said, "Right, you present the keys." And I'm not joking you. From that day, I kind of got hooked on housing. And the smiles, the impact that you saw, the immediate impact you saw on families, of people getting a home for the first time, or moving out of rough sleeping for the first time into their own safe space, secure space, just caught me. Caught me in the heart, caught me in the head, caught me in the gut, caught me everywhere. And I haven't looked back since then. I'm now 34 years in the sector, which is an awful long time when you say it like that. But I've loved it, and kind of progressed then through finance as a finance director, company secretary with Accord, kind of acted as group chief executive deputy chief executive at times for them, and then was kind of headhunted into what became Prime Focus. It was Focus Housing Association, became Prime Focus. I think it's now part of Midland Art. And I had a fantastic time there. Really got to see how a large housing association operated, the challenges that it brought, the finance. I was head of group finance director and company secretary for almost 7 years in total, and loved every minute of it. I have to be honest, it was great crack. Kind of went back. I was headhunted again by EY to go back into the private sector, Ernst Young, to go back to the private sector in London to work for them in their PPP team. But I was a bit cheeky because at that stage, myself and my wife had decided we wanted to move back to Ireland. So we kind of said to them, look, thank you, would like to take the job, haven't been offered it, would like to take the job, but actually would prefer to be in Ireland. And they said, funny enough, we just happen to have a job in Ireland. So I joined the Irish team on PPP. Only lasted about 8 months to a year there. And I'll be honest with you, it was one of the most demoralizing times I had. Not because EY are a great company, don't get me wrong, but I just couldn't get to grips with what they were doing from a private sector perspective. Didn't enjoy it, didn't like it, wasn't quite built for that, I don't think. And I got offered a job as head of finance for Ireland's largest housing association at the time, Respond. Now, largest, it was 4,000 homes. Okay, so that gives you a sense of where we were in Ireland. We were still at the very early stages. That was back in 2004. And since then, I've kind of stayed in the sector or been part of the sector all the way through. 5 years ago, I took on the role of chief executive for Circle, and we've been growing Circle from relatively modest size into one of Ireland's larger associations, and we have a great future ahead of us in terms of our growth and the delivery of homes for people in need.
Love that. We'll come back to that because obviously I want to unpack the Circle situation. But talk to me about, because you've just done both sides. Talk to me about some of the real major differences you've seen in that period. And how different is it between England and Ireland in terms of how housing works?
Yeah, and there are times when it's very similar, and there are times when it's poles apart. Right. And just it's simple things. Obviously, scale is one of the critical things. If you can imagine, Ireland, we've got 450 housing associations. Now, if you get that, we're 16th of the size of the UK in terms of population. If you were to multiply that up, we would swamp the UK in terms of housing associations. So we've a lot of very, very, very small housing associations. Okay. 85% of our housing associations have less than 10 homes. So if you can imagine, we've only got 55,000 homes in the whole sector. So we'd fit in as a regional element for people for places or somewhere else like that. But one of the places I think that we're probably slightly further ahead is that in terms of we're very much involved in tenant engagement. We're very much at the I suppose cutting edge now of net zero and all that kind of stuff, and we can maybe talk about that a little later when we talk about the overall economy. Where we're miles behind, for example, I'd say 10 years behind. And when I was in Prime Focus, we were doing capital market stuff back then. That's nearly 25 years ago. We haven't raised one single cent in Ireland on the capital markets here. And partly because we haven't had the scale, but also partly because we haven't had the expertise to be able to deal with it properly in our sector. So we're, from a funding perspective, we're miles behind on that. But we also have, in Ireland, we have a dedicated funding bank, you could say, which is partly state-owned, which basically funds everything at a rate that is better than most capital market issuances at this point in time, even at the lower lens. And we have a funding system that allows us to have a 25-year guarantee on our income from the state, which means that the funders that we do utilize are very comfortable with us because if anybody fails, and there's never been a failure in 40 years in the Irish sector. If anybody does fails, the state will step in and pay the debt off in respect of it. So we've a very strong funding system. I think the other major difference is that we actually have a long-term housing plan, government-sponsored housing plan called Housing for All, which some people think is brilliant. Some people think it's not as good as it could be. But the reality is we have one where if you look at the UK at this point in time, we're still struggling to get stuff that's longer term that we can identify. Now, some of that's political in nature. I think you've had you've had definitely more ministers for housing in the UK than you've had prime ministers, and that's saying something else. And in Ireland, though, we've had, for example, the same minister for the last 4 years. He knows his brief. He's very good at it. He's delivering it. We have very strong political parties that are very committed to actually housing. I think, like in the UK, it's probably number 1, 2, or 3 in the news headlines most days, and in Ireland it's no different. So there's lots of similarities. We do have a housing crisis. I tend to refer to it as a housing emergency, and I would say if you scale on a per capita basis, it's probably very similar to what you have in the UK at this point in time in terms of the crisis there as well.
Wow. Well, we'll unpack that as well, but just go back a little bit, just staying on the past for the moment. What are some of the things that come up for you that you're really proud about working in housing? Because you talk passionately about it. That first moment got you in all of the fields. What are some of the things that you reflect on that you're really proud of in that period of your career?
Yeah, I think I was very fortunate to be at a time when there was a lot happening. There was a lot of innovation. So, for example, one of my earliest, proudest moments was that I was appointed by a lot of the housing associations in the UK, not just in England, but in the UK, to chair their lending group, as it were, when we were looking at selling off the housing corporation loan book. So that's how far back I go. And I was appointed by my peers to represent them. So that was hugely a proud moment for me. I think as I went on then through the career, I was fortunate enough to win a couple of significant awards with the Financial Times for innovation in funding for the sector, which was great. We set up what was the first lending SPV within a group at the time with Prime Focus, which was great. And the figures don't seem very big now, but at the time we looked at a 250 million facility, which was the biggest of its kind by a significant number at that point. And since then, when I look back, one of the proudest things is that the number of homes that I've been involved in actually delivering in one shape or another. And at the moment, the figure's close to about 10,000 homes over my lifetime, which is, I do think on a regular basis about those families and the multiple families that some of those homes that will have helped since that period of time. That to me is what helps me get up every morning. It helps me get over the insecurity of knowing that you're a CEO. When you make a decision, you're going to change somebody's life in some shape or form, good and bad at times. And it's always that worry every day. But I look back and think, look, hasn't been too bad so far. So let's keep going. So I have a lot of very proud moments. I have a great family. I couldn't have done anything what I've done without a massive support from my wife and from my kids and all that kind of stuff. So, I love the fact that they understand and know what I do and are very, very supportive of what I do. So I'm one of those lucky guys. I'm also probably one of those ultimate optimists, who think things will get better if we just keep working at it somehow.
I hope so. Yeah, I do hope so. And I think it's nice to have that optimism because sometimes if you read everything and you believe everything you read, you can sometimes get yourself into a negative loop of doom, can't you? Of just everything's bad and everything's terrible. So I think that's important. How important's finance been in because I often have this question from people in giving you the right foundation for your leadership as being a chief exec, because everything feels quite funding heavy at the moment, right? What can we afford? How can we unlock some capital so we can invest in our stock? Like, how important's that been, do you think, the first part of your career?
I think in the early parts of my career, the very early parts I was the archetypal accountant, and I do mean accountant. I wouldn't even say I was finance. I hadn't no real concept about what finance really meant. And I think over the years, it gave me the basis of being able to balance the detail that you need, but also growing that understanding over time. And one of the things that has been said to me on a regular basis, and I do agree, I'm now very clearly, I really wasn't an archetypal accountant for a number of reasons. I probably cared too much about people. Now, I know there's a lot of accountants out there going to be on, we can't say that.
Look, they don't listen to the show, so we're all right.
That's all right. We're all right. Okay. I am only joking. But I do think I've always had a more strategic view of how things should work. And how things should happen. The other thing that I've always been very strong is partnership and learning from others. And I kind of had this this approach that is every year trying to do something to challenge myself in terms of learning. So I take on something else that's different, that's outside my normal comfort zone, to give me that breadth of experience. But I think finance has given me the opportunity. I can see across the organization in a more strategic way than maybe others can, having come through just a specific route. And I've been very fortunate enough to be able to apply that across a number of different markets and a number of different career choices. And I think that's also been very important. I haven't just been housing. I've had private market stuff, I've had private property stuff, I've had businesses in other ways that I've been able to be involved in, and that's helped me keep a broader sense of what we're trying to achieve. I think the one place that I'm still learning, still growing with, and still trying to achieve more in is in terms of understanding how we impact on our tenants' lives and our residents' lives, customers, whoever you want to call them. And that's always a challenge, and always trying to make sure you're doing the right thing in the right way, not just to be seen to be doing it, but actually to help and impact on people's lives.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And as we stand here today, just for the viewers, really, just give us a helicopter overview of Circle Voluntary Housing Association as it stands today. I know you've done unit size and stuff, but give us a bit of the background and the sort of where we sit today.
Yeah, sure. We are, as I said, we're top 5 in Ireland in terms of the size. We've about 62 staff at this point in time. We'll grow to about 100 staff within the next 6 months because of the rate of growth. And that's one thing that's probably slightly different in the UK versus Ireland. Housing associations in Ireland are at the forefront of delivery of housing for everybody at this point in time. Not so much for sale, but in every terms of the intermediate market plus the social market. Our target for the next 3 years in terms of our delivery is 3,500 homes. Our pipeline is we're hoping to get our pipeline up to 5,000 homes within the next 3 months. So there's a rapid rate of growth within our sector, but our sector is dominated from that perspective by 6 organisations, the 6 large housing associations which form up the alliance, which I can talk about later. But Circle is very much a general needs housing association. We do a lot of partnership work with other organisations. One of the things that we're very clear about is that we are an excellent landlord, and we know that because our tenants and residents tell us that. Our satisfaction ratings are about 94% at this point in time, and that's just general satisfaction. On repairs and maintenance, it's slightly lower, it's about 86%, but it's still one of the better ones in Ireland. And it's been consistently that level for the last 2.5 years. And I've been here 5 years, and in that time we've grown from 19 staff to over 60. We've more than doubled in size in terms of numbers that we've added in terms of our housing, and we intend to do the same again in the next 3 years. So it's been a phenomenal time within the housing sector, and Circle has been at the forefront of that. We're kind of seen differently in that we are a real partnership organisation. So we work with organisations who bring other services. So, for example, we do housing for people with a disability, or people coming out of rough sleeping, people coming out of addiction. But we're very clear, we're not a service provider to support those individuals. We make sure they have fantastic homes to live in, well maintained, that the rents are managed in a way that allows them to live a comfortable life. But we know that we're not the experts on how they need additional supports. So we work with the other organisations to be able to do that on a very deliberate basis. And that kind of marks us out from most of our other colleagues who either have or are involved in specialist services within those kind of services.
Yeah, and what geographies do you cover? Just is it quite sparse, or is it in one particular location of Ireland?
Well, when I started 5 years ago, we were in Dublin and Kildare, which are two adjoining counties. Now we're in 21 different counties across the country. And our intention is there are 26 counties in Ireland. We probably won't do the other 5 at this point because we don't want to overstretch into places that geographically are just that bit far for us. But the intention would be over time that we probably will do once we get a big enough mass of properties around the different parts of the country. Our intention has never been to grow big. The reason we're growing bigger is because there's a need. Our intention has always been to help with the development of property to meet the need that's there. If that need goes away, then we stop doing that, and that we're very clear about that. But the nature of the requirement is that there is an intentional growth requirement at this point in time, which we're working on.
And is there like a bigger need in any of them counties in particular, or is it kind of just, is it nicely spread across the whole piece, really?
It's interesting. Since COVID, it's spread more evenly than it was previously. I mean, up to COVID, up to about 3 years ago, Dublin, Cork, Limerick, the bigger urban areas is where the demand was. But since COVID, we're seeing a kind of I won't say complete equalization, but certainly greater levels of demand in more rural areas because we can, and people have gotten used to working more remotely. People are happy to work. Businesses are happy to work remotely. Our own organization, which is slightly different to others, but probably just only slightly, is that we have 100% agile staff. So nobody works in an office. We have an office. People are happy to go there from time to time if they need to. And for those who want to, it's open for them to utilize. But the reality is 100% of our staff work remotely and can do 5 days a week. We don't insist on having them in the office at particular times. And what we found, because we've been true to that and we've geared the organization for that, we've not lost anything in productivity. In fact, if anything, I'd suggest our productivity has gone up a bit since we've done that. So it's been a very positive experience in some respects for COVID, since COVID.
Yeah, and I presume that helps you with the skills challenge, because I presume there is a skills challenge if you've got such small housing associations, 400 and odd. It probably helps you recruiting from the UK market as well as the Irish market, I presume.
Yeah, very much so. To be honest, we do a little bit of recruitment from the UK. We've had about 3 or 4 people that we've recruited in. They've been very important posts for us because they bring the knowledge skill that we still require in Ireland. As I said, we're started very early, for example, in asset management. So we've been very fortunate to have a fantastic guy working for us who has a massive amount of skills and knowledge from the UK sector. And we've had people from finance. We've had people in homes deliveries as well that have come from the UK because we offer that flexibility and because we have that flexibility built into what we do. And so far, it's all gone well.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, because I think people kick me if I don't ask this, is, in the UK, we've really restricted from building new homes, like, planning land. It's all very difficult and at a premium. What's the landscape look like to develop new homes in Ireland? Similar, or is it much easier? You've done both.
To be honest, it's very similar. These are some of the areas where we do have very similar issues. Our planning system is diabolical, and their government are working on bringing in a whole new planning system, or updating at least the planning system what we have, which you can take up to 5 years to get a house built in Ireland, which is just ridiculous. The land is relatively scarce, albeit that we are an underpopulated country with lots of green land. The reality of it is it's not zoned and it's not serviced. So the cost of getting there is huge. In some respects, we've seen slightly higher levels of inflation in the building side of stuff that compared to the UK, because you have to ship everything to Ireland. So as well as the normal costs on top of that, we've had additional shipping costs, which also has seen inflation. So we're slightly more expensive from that perspective. And if I give you the average, this is the average cost of a house in Ireland at this point in time, sales price, the value price is 432,000 for a 2-bed house. That's the average. Yeah.
Why so? Just because of the lack of demand, or the
lack of supply is the big thing. Yeah, a lack of supply. We've seen a massive amount of inflation in the last 2 years in respect to build costs, and we have scarce resource when it comes to actual people on the ground building. There's a survey that's been done recently by one of our national economic councils, which kind of says at this point in time in Ireland, we need 100,000 additional builders to build the homes if we're to meet our current targets. Now, if you take it at our current targets are 33,000 homes a year. Currently, we're hitting about 28 to 29,000. Our actual need, based on the recent set of surveys that have been carried out and the census that's been carried out, is closer to 60,000 homes a year. Now, if you're government, and I understand it completely, if you're government, you're not going to suddenly announce, well, actually, our now new target is 60,000, because we're not hitting the current target. So there's no way I'm going to double that, can miss it by twice the amount from a political perspective. So, yeah, we have, just to hit the 33,000, we need 100,000 more builders in the country. And we don't have them at this point in time.
It's crazy. It's such a big number. And something where Yeah, I think of Ireland. I think lots of areas where you could develop, but I presume it's not possible. It's difficult. But it's interesting all the same. 6 years in, or the 6th year as chief exec.
Yeah.
What are you looking for, and I suppose what are your key aspirations in your tenure moving forward? Kind of what do you want to achieve with Circle?
Great question. I think for the first couple of years, it was very much about stabilization and really working out what we wanted to do. Since then, it's been about really sticking to what our vision for the future is, and that is to provide people in housing need with homes. And we very much stick to the knitting in respect to that. We have been very conscious about bringing our team along with us, but one of the things that we've been at the forefront in Ireland on, and this is, you may say, yeah, we've been doing that for decades in the UK, but actually it's new in Ireland. It's tenant engagement, proper tenant engagement, bringing our tenants along with us, making sure that they're at the heart of the decision making that we do, ensuring that they have a voice, a real voice, not just a nod by having somebody on the board, but having real influence in terms of how decisions are made. Something that we've been kind of growing within our organization and growing within our sector. We've been leaders in the sectors in respect to that. So one of the big projects we have is called Tenant First, and it's literally that, making sure that our tenants are part of every decision and that they have a voice in every decision. So we've been working really strong on that. And in the next 3 or 4 years, I'd really like to see that expand out. We've started to talk about a national approach to that with other organizations, which has been great. And then the other big project that we're working on is a project called Quality in Our Diversity. And Ireland, like having lived in the UK, and particularly having lived in Birmingham, when I came back to Ireland, it hadn't struck me before I left, but it certainly struck me when I came back. One, how white, how European, how much lack of diversity there was in Ireland, and that's continued in many respects. So what we've been trying to do is to ensure that there's greater diversity in what we do, and we have greater inclusion for those diverse communities that are now coming in. Ireland, on a per capita basis, has one of the biggest numbers in terms of people coming from the Ukraine, people coming for international protection across Europe and across other, I suppose, what you might call developed states. So we're very lucky that we have got this richness and diversity within the country. But what we don't see is where it's impacting, and what we need. One of the things that we set about doing is putting a program together which sets a benchmark for all of the housing associations in Ireland to be able to work with, that actually demonstrates clearly that we're cognizant of it, that it impacts on how we do things, and that our tenants and our staffing reflects that diverse communities that we're working in.
No, I love that. And I wanted to talk about this because I think it's quite important based on what you've said about the landscape of the housing market. You're chairperson for the Housing Alliance in Ireland. Talk us a little bit about that, because that's some of the biggest housing associations, isn't it, in Ireland, in that alliance? And I presume you can push some continuity, but also some kind of the agendas across the biggest housing associations. It's probably easier than the UK for that perspective, I presume.
Yeah, in fairness, it really is easier. When you look at the landscape in the UK, and when you've got the G15, you've got the Northern Housing Group, you've got a Northern Housing Consortium, you've got a whole range of different consortiums that work together. But they're working together for effectively the same kind of thing, to try and influence, if not in the local area, then on a national basis, what's happening in terms of housing policy. The alliance is in Ireland is no difference. We have the 6 largest members, and I've gave you some figures earlier on. 55,000 homes owned in the whole of the social housing sector by what's called approved housing bodies and their housing associations. So same as RPs, registered providers. So 55,000 in total. The Housing Alliance own nearly 36,000 of those homes. So we own nearly 85% of the total social housing stock at this point in time. We are also providing 90% of all social and affordable housing at this point in time for the Irish market. Local authorities are doing a bit. There's a new organisation called the Land Development Agency, which was set up by government to kind of aggregate land, master plan it, and then develop it and hand it across for management, basically. So our role is to try and ensure that we remove where we can the blockages to delivery, because there's been a number of policy blockages, but also just pure bureaucratic blockages that have hampered the delivery of housing over many decades, actually. So now we've become very much more professional about it. We have this alliance, which is very much about bringing the strength and experience of those organizations into play in respect of influencing housing policy. And we've been very successful over the last 4 or 5 years in respect to that.
Yeah, what's been some of the benefits you've seen? Because I presume it's making things quicker because you're learning from each other's mistakes and successes. But what have been some of the offshoots that you've seen in terms of that alliance and since it's been formed?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you take that our key tenet was to actually improve delivery. Well, what we've done is we've improved delivery by nearly 60% in the period of 3 years.
Yeah.
So we're delivering 60% more homes than we have been previously. There was a point in time in Ireland when if you went, what's you talk about housing associations, people go, what's a housing association now, or what's an approved housing body? Now it's current language. Everybody understands what it is. So there's a lot more recognition about what the work we're doing. And we also said about kind of removing some of the stigma that's attached to social housing. A lot of people, wrongly associate social housing with, multi-generational unemployment, with drug abuse, with antisocial behaviour and all that kind of stuff. In Ireland, if you take that the average wage is €35,000 per year, that's the average industrial wage. The social housing limit, highest limit of earnings is 34,000. So a very large proportion of the Irish population actually would qualify for social housing. That's your people in the police, people in the nurses, that's your teachers, all those kind of people who live in social housing. Yeah. And we advocate for that for them, that they should do, because actually well managed, well maintained, security of tenure, all those things that you'd want to see. And I think that's one of the things that kind of we're proudest about, is that we've raised the profile, we've delivered more homes like we said we would, and now we're looking to see what else can we do to improve that output over the coming years.
Amazing. And you mentioned that the government have a plan. I know not all popular with everyone. How important has that been for housing in Ireland? But secondly, what's the relationship like between government and housing associations? Because obviously it can be good and bad in the UK. It really can. Yeah. But what's it like in Ireland from that landscape?
Yeah, I can honestly say that at this point, the relationship side of it is pretty good. If you take it that at this point, we're effectively the delivery arm of social and affordable housing for the state. And as a result of which, we have a lot of interaction. I would meet with the minister and his officials probably at least monthly, both from an alliance perspective or from a circle perspective, to talk about how we can do more and how we can get more done. So we've a relatively positive at this point in time. And I do understand what it's like in the UK, because I've been on the board of the Charter Institute of Housing. We've been one of the, I suppose, at times, one of the loudest criticizers of how the sector has lost its way a little bit in the UK in terms of its focus. And a very stark statistic that I saw, it's probably about 6 months ago now, was that the social housing sector only produced something like 6% of their output as social housing. And you have to wonder, yes, there's a huge need for an affordable intermediate market, but actually there's still a huge need for social housing.
There is.
And if that's what we're supposed to be doing, that's what we're supposed to be doing. But also the maintenance that's gone into some of these homes in the UK, there's some really horrible examples that quite rightly have been demonstrated by ITV and all the other media organizations that need to be called out and dealt with. Now, I know there will be chief executives and chairmen right across the country listening to what I'm saying and going, yeah, but it's only a very small percentage. If you've got 160,000 homes and 2% of your 160,000 homes have that's over 4,000 families that are impacted by what you're doing or not doing. Great for the other 98%. Fantastic. But you need to be making sure that you do the whole thing. So it is, in Ireland, we don't, at this point, we don't have that difficulty, thankfully, because most of our stock is actually relatively new when you look at it compared to the UK. But we do have a plan. It's called Housing for All. It's a fantastic multi-annual plan with a commitment of $4 billion of funding every year, guaranteed from the state, for delivery of new homes. And that's the state bit of it. So that would equate to about 35%. of the cost. You've then got a bank effectively run by the state saying we will lend the rest to the sector. So, we have got very secure, very strong funding lines that allow us to deliver what needs to be delivered. And the plan demonstrates very clearly how you do that. It links with a 40-year plan as the National Development Plan, which says, here's how we're going to do this over the next 40 years. So we have a clear direction of travel. We have clear policy and procedure. When it was initially delivered 2 years ago, everybody's gone, that the hint was in the title, Housing for All. It touched on every type of housing in every kind of tenure you could think of. But in fact, what it's done is as it's evolved, we're getting more detailed in respect of the policy procedure that's required. We're getting more output as a result of it. And whether you like our lump, it's actually given us a good foundation for the future. Now, that could change in 2 years because a bit like yourselves in the UK, we have a general election coming up. And there's likely to be, well, if you believe the polls, there's likely to be a very significant change in how that will be impacted. Doesn't take away that housing will still be number 1 or 2 in terms of headline requirements and policy requirements, but how it might be dealt with might be different.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And obviously we're all going through the same thing. Everyone that I speak to, give or take, would say that the UK is desperate for a plan. Any plan, to be honest. And more because of the certainty that a plan would provide than anything else, because it's the chopping and changing of policy, the chopping and changing of a plan. Is it 2 questions? One is, having sitting on the CIH at the moment, as you do, is that really useful for you to take back to Ireland, some of the things that we're doing here? That'd be my first question. And the second would be, is it fair that we level such criticism at the government in the UK of not having a plan? Because clearly it's tough right now.
I would always advocate for a plan regardless.
Yeah, of course.
To be honest. And the reason I say that is that you won't get it right. And like every good plan, as soon as you start to deliver it, you find the context has changed or something has changed. And that's actually one of the excuses lots of people use for not putting plans in place. Oh, the government will change in 2 years. No point doing one now. Or, but if the interest rates move, that's going to change the whole direction of things. That's neither here nor there. What it does is it gives you a foundation for direction. And if you've got everybody pointed in the one direction, you have a better opportunity to deliver more in that way. So I would 100% advocate for a plan. I think that's one of the major differences between 2 countries, that belief of, we know political things are going to change in some shape or form, but we all need to be pointed in the same direction. So that's the first thing on the plan. I think the relationship in the UK has changed over the last couple of years. And in fairness, Minister Gove has been out there advocating for this is what we need to do. I think Prime Minister Sunak, having said what he said about decarbonisation and net zero and the movement on the timescales, I kind of get to a degree what he's trying to do is bring more people along with him. The reality is I don't know if we have time. We need to be doing stuff quicker. We need to be kind of gearing up quicker to get stuff done. And I think without a plan, a really dedicated, resourced, funded plan, then I think it's going to struggle. And I think we could get, I know he's only pushing it, I think, by 5 years, but even pushing it by 5 years, that's probably going to slip to 8 or 10 years. So we're already significantly behind there. So I do think that it's been helpful for me to be able to bring stuff back as I meet with the minister and the officials on a very regular basis. And I can honestly point to research. I can honestly point to stuff that's been done by the CIH that they monitor, they evaluate in terms of how the UK policy position is moving, and to look at how that works within Ireland then as well, or might work within Ireland. So there are things that we learn, like the net zero stuff actually started to come out of the UK. We accelerated the work we did on it over here. We made it law from 2021 that all new housing had to be NZ. So all brand new housing since 2021 has had to have an NZ rating of A2 or better, which I think is the same kind of ratings you have over there for your future. And we need to get to zero carbon by 2020, by 2030. So we're sticking to that target. We haven't been let off anything at this point anyway. And I don't think they will do. I think there's a drive even from the new potential government that say they're going to come in. They're kind of saying, no, we're going to keep we're going to keep to the targets that we set. So we are going to move probably a little bit quicker. Might be a bit easier in a smaller population, smaller country, but I think it's one of the things that might be populist to say we're going to make it a bit easier, but actually, is it the right thing to be doing? I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask that question, so we'll ask it now because I've got something else to ask you about the housing emergency. But on the net zero carbon, the big conversation and topic I'm certainly having most days at the moment is the trade-off between investing in current stock, so the net zero stuff and damp and mold. Not saying that that's one of the choices, or developing new homes. And it feels like the developing of new homes has taken a secondary until the government changed their mind on a couple of bits. Where's the money going to come from for you, given your standpoint on both sides, for us to fund that? Or can the sector achieve net zero on its own without the funding, do you think?
Honestly, no. Sector can't do it in the UK or Ireland. It can't be done on its own. I'm absolutely certain of that. From all the financial analysis I've done, from all the financial analysis I've seen from the CIH and others, there's absolutely no way that a sector on its own can do it. But I also don't think it should do. I'll be honest with you. I think this is something that has got to be given the right priority within government, with the right priority across the country. The difficulty, as I said, in Ireland, we're in a slightly different position. We have a much younger housing stock right across the country, owned by local authorities, owned by approved housing bodies. Even the newer housing stock that's been built in for the private market, it's all exactly that, newer. So we probably don't have the same degree. You've got homes 300 and 400 years old. You've got homes that have been around, that are in the council ownership 300 or 400 years, and you're thinking, how is that going to be brought up to the relevant standard within the timescale? And the only way that local authorities, the only way that approved RPs can do it is through some additional support by government. Now, I think we're getting to a point, or if we're not already at it, where that balance between new versus existing has tipped. And I do think it's got to be into the existing more than the new. That means that there will be people who will have a housing crisis for a longer period of time. But I think being consistent that you continue with both, but the balance has got to be slightly different now to move it forward more quickly. We're seeing the impact of climate every day now. We joked about the rain in Ireland and the rain over there. Actually, I'm still looking at who's actually building the ark, because I think we're going to need it shortly. It is that thing. We've got to bring greater momentum to this net zero approach if we're going to really undo some of the climate damage we've done. But that will mean, and I know it pains me every time I say it, but it does for me mean that we will see people in housing crisis for a bit longer than we would want.
I agree, and you've got the big housing associations in the UK. You've got smaller ones that haven't got the money to do either. So the reality is, unless there's some intervention or there's some funding available, I don't see either are going to get fixed, if I'm being honest. And if there is any money available, it'll be going into net zero, and that means that those communities will be lacking in housing. Just on in your opinion, and I'm probably talking across Ireland and the UK here, but what's missing from the plan to fundamentally fix the housing emergency? What are we missing? What would help us, or not solve it, but what's fundamentally lacking in that plan to start to see a turn in the dial? Because at the moment, I don't see it getting any easier year by year. What would you say is missing?
Okay. I've talked in Ireland about we need to be more radical in our thinking in terms of this process. And I think the first thing is that in Ireland, we actually we call it a housing crisis, as they do in the UK, but I want it stepped up into a housing emergency, because I think that really focuses the mind. It also brings together then some national requirements that have to be met in order to help move it forward. But understandably, politicians are slow to actually adopt that kind of statement because it reflects on them as well. In Ireland, we created a thing called Sláinte Care, Okay, and it's a mix of Sláinte's Health in Ireland and care. So, but it's a new approach to the care policy platform, and that's to bring a multi-party, a multi-dimensional approach to it, where you involved all of the political parties, but all of the key deliverers of healthcare within the country, to work on how you actually, what's the best way of doing it, as opposed to what's my ideology, because each party has an ideology, or the market has an approach which they believe is better than everybody else.
Yeah.
But Sláinte Care actually has brought together the whole of the health delivery system to say, okay, from a policy and delivery perspective, how do we utilize everything we've got at our behest to actually make it better? It's starting to see small incremental changes that are really positive. And what I've called for is a Sláinte Care approach to housing in Ireland. Yeah. And I think there's something similar required in the UK, where you forget about individual parties and you forget about what the market can do or can't do, you forget about what RPs are good at or not, and you actually bring the lot together to say, okay, the only way to resolve this is for us to sit down and work together. I think you have to implement different emergency planning plans that are now planning approaches that allow you to deliver quicker, because the cost that goes into it is huge. I also believe that there's a real opportunity to bring in the capital markets, bring in the housing markets to actually, the private markets to actually work across the piece as well to actually deliver more. So I don't think I'd love to be able to say there's one particular way. If you did this, it'll change everything. I think the one thing to change this is to change everything. So in other words, you bring everybody together. You stop this my idea is better than your idea approach that each government will have, and that's how they work. And we have a classic example of it can be done in Ireland. And I think it should be something that's investigated, looked at, and reviewed by other countries to say, yeah, where we have this crisis, we need to do it in this particular way. And can I say to you, unfortunately, the housing crisis in Ireland and the housing crisis that we've got in the UK is replicated in Germany. It's replicated in France. Exactly. It's a European-wide. It's actually probably becoming a global issue at this point in time. So yeah, it is something we do need to work on. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot more displacement than we have today.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that when I speak to you, I just get this enthusiasm for the sector. And it wasn't something I was going to ask about, but I'm really keen. Like, part of this podcast for me is about shining a light on all the good stuff that the sector does. But it's also about trying to bring in new skills to the sector. And obviously you coming from the private sector into public sector, albeit a long time ago. How do we make this sector more appealing? There's so much exciting stuff going on. We're developing new homes. We're at the forefront of some big crises in terms of the housing crisis, building new homes, net zero carbon. There's some interesting careers in this sector. How do we make it more appealing? Because I think people think of housing, especially in the UK, and they go to the bad news press, the bad stories, all the other stuff. But I just think it's such a great sector. But how do we make it more appealing to the next generation so more people don't just fall into it as they typically do?
I absolutely agree with you. And you can hear my enthusiasm for it, because that's genuinely how I feel about it. I love what I do every day. I get up every day thinking, what am I going to do today? Yeah, let's do it. The challenges are phenomenal, but the outcome is phenomenal as well. When you see what people get from it, it's amazing, both from a staffing perspective, but also from a tenant or customer perspective. So, yeah, I mean, the CIH have been working to try and, I suppose, generate an enthusiasm around being a housing professional, because I think that's what we've missed. I think we've got accountants, they're financial professionals. We've got developers and engineers, they're in the building profession. Actually, you can be a real housing professional across a whole range of different areas within housing, just by being in it. So, for example, I am a housing professional. I was an accountant, but now I'm a housing professional, and I'm very proud to be a housing professional. And I think we need to keep selling that story. Actually, it's not one route, and it's not one thing that you can do. It's actually right across the whole of the housing experience that you can be a professional. And I think when people get into it, like most of the people I know now, particularly my age, that are in it, have been in it for their lives, because you don't want to leave it. It has that impact on you. Unfortunately, it doesn't always pay the best, and I think that's one of the things that we need to recognize for some of the professionals that are out there, that they should be getting more pay. We should be finding a way to actually reward people better. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, but you get the outcomes. Yeah, you still need to feed people. You still need to have a family, buy a house, or rent a house. So we need to make it financially as attractive as we do some other places. But the reality of it is that I think it's a sector that is beginning to see how much influence it can exert on society. And I think when society kind of realizes actually if you're part of that, then you have that opportunity as well. Then it becomes attractive for others to join it. And I do think the more we talk about being a proud housing professional, the more people will take notice of it.
Yeah, no, it's a really good answer. And as we wrap up, I suppose the last thing for me is just, what are you excited for? You've achieved a lot in your career. You've had some really good moments, but what's the sort of blue sky thinking of some of the stuff that you'd like to see in the remainder of your career? Maybe for Circle or maybe for you personally, what do you want to see before your career ends?
Career end is a real one of those kind of concepts. I feel
like I've just put you into retirement in about 5 minutes there, but I just mean what do you want to see in the next 10 to 18?
My wife keeps saying to me, have you thought about retiring? I said, no, and I don't intend to. I've got a long time to go yet. They've just changed the age in Ireland to 70. I'm going until 70. I think for me, I really want to hear the customer voice more. The tenant voice needs to be amplified in Ireland, particularly. I think it's something, and I think recent UK experiences in terms of service provision and lack of service provision also needs that new approach, that new feeling that the customer has a say in what we do. So for me, that's a really important part of what I see I'm going to be working very, very much on. I am also very keen to do one of the things you've been talking about, and that is to attract more people into this sector. And, as you can tell, I'm not afraid to talk. Shutting me up at times can be a difficulty. But I want to utilize that to actually make people see that and feel that actually this is somewhere you should be. You should be thinking about this as a career. So for me, that's really important. And then, personally, I have a few years left in me, I hope. I can bring value in those few years and just continue to have the enthusiasm that I have for what we do, because I believe it's probably one of the best jobs in the world.
Yeah, what a lovely way to finish. I mean, I'm sure people are going to get loads of value out of that. I've learned a lot about the Irish housing market today, which is great. And you are an eternal optimist. I think, honestly, if we could have more people with your optimism in the sector, we might not get ourselves into some of these scrapes. But I really appreciate your insights, and I know people are going to love that episode. And I thank you for the time you've given us.
Not at all, James. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing it. And I hope I'm open to any questions anybody else wants to raise with me at any time. Don't hesitate to give
I'll leave your email address in the comments for people. But thank you for coming on.
Not at all. Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.